We welcome José Manuel Salazar-Xirinachs, Executive Secretary of the Economic Committee for Latin America and the Caribbean of the United Nations, ECLAC, accompanied by Adela Cortina, Professor in Political Ethics in Valencia, Spain. We greet those that accompany us presentially and those that accompany us through the virtual platforms. We welcome ambassadors and members of ECLAC and the United Nations and representatives of the diplomatic corps, representatives of international agencies, and colleagues on programs of the United Nations. We also greet representatives of civil organizations, the entrepreneurial sector, people of the academic staff of ECLAC. Ladies and gentlemen, on the 25th February, by Resolution 106 of the Social and Economic, ECLAC is created in Santiago, the Committee for Latin America and the Caribbean. 75 years since its creation, we organized this cycle of keynote conferences to celebrate this anniversary that will extend till February 2024. As I said, today we have the presence of Adela Cortina, teacher of ethics and political policies of the University of Valencia, Spain, and her conference called Migrations, Aporophobia, and Challenges that are Ethical for Humankind, Reactions Towards Migration of Latin America and the Caribbean. Now the words of our Executive Secretary. Good afternoon, dear authorities of the government, representatives of the Diplomatic Corps, the Ambassador of Spain, the Ambassador of Costa Rica, officers of the system of the United Nations, the director of UNICEF is in the room, I believe. How do you do? Colleagues from ECLAC, public connected through all our virtual platforms, friends. Welcome once again to ECLAC, to the 6th keynote conference that is commemorative of the 75th anniversary of our dear institution. As has been said, we have had a cycle of conferences, and these continue. There are 2 or 3 more before the year ends. We have invited eminent thinkers to accompany us so as to exchange new perspectives, allow a dialogue and renewed thought on the new challenges of the organization and of the region. In this framework, it is a great honor for me to give the warmest welcome to this cycle of conferences to an important intellectual, Adela Cortina, Emeritus Professor of Ethics and Political Philosophy at the University of Valencia, Spain. Adela Cortina is one of the greatest leaders of philosophical, ethical thought and moral thought of the Hispanic world and of the world as a whole. Original from Valencia, where she studied philosophy and humanities and obtained her PhD in 1976. Since 1987, she is a teacher of ethics and political philosophy at the University of Valencia. In 2008, she becomes the first woman that is member of the Academy of Moral and Political Sciences of Spain since its foundation in 1857. She is also director of the Master and the program of Inter-University Doctorate and academic director of the Foundation ETNOR for the Ethics in Business and Organization. She's a member of the National Committee of Assisted Human Reproduction and the Ethical Committee for Scientific and Technological Research. And on diverse occasions, she has formed part of the jury of the prizes or awards Príncipe Asturias in Communication in Humanities and Social Sciences. Adela Cortina has been invested as an honorary doctor by over 15 universities with more than 20 works published. She received in the year 2007 the International Award on Ensayo Jovellanos for Ethics and Cordial Reasoning. In 2014, the award for What Ethics Really is Useful. In 2017, she received the high distinction from the Generalitat Valenciana and the Cross of the Order of James I the Conqueror. Her last book is Cosmopolitan Ethics of the year 2021. Her philosophical work takes in the ethics of discourse, applied ethics such as bioethics, economic ethics, and entrepreneurial ethics, the theory of democracy, the theories of citizenship, the mass media, human rights, and more recently, artificial intelligence. For ECLAC and for our priorities in work, and even more important, for the countries of Latin America and the Caribbean, the reflections of Adela Cortina are not only inspiring, but also of great importance and depth, and as well as being urgent. In 2013, Adela Cortina wrote that no society may function if its members do not maintain an ethical attitude. No country may leave crisis if immoral conducts of its citizens and politicians continue to proliferate with all impunity. End of the quote. Her abundant writings make us recall that now, more than ever, economic development, as well as social pacts and democracy, need of ethics. In ECLAC, we have insisted that Latin America and the Caribbean require a great transformation to obtain a more productive growth that is inclusive and sustainable. The great transformation we propose at ECLAC will not happen spontaneously nor automatically. It is a process for you have to be governed, managed, guided, and induced. And it will not take place nor for an assumed magics of the market, nor for an assumed magics of the state. The key is in the processes of collaboration amongst all sectors of society and the trust of the connective tissue amongst them. And that trust only may be constructed with behaviors that are ethical. In the invisible hand of the market and the visible hand of the state, the ideas of Adela Cortina add hand-in-hand values, virtues, and civical principles and ethical. Without that hand, without that cornerstone, democracy cannot operate, nor economy, nor policy. And as Adela Cortina has told us, without that frequently forgotten custom of saying the truth without veracity in public life, does not allow us to have possible trust. Economists should take note of Adela Cortina's words, for which she arguments, that are overrepresented, as we say. Adela Cortina argues that ethics makes costs cheaper, that it is profitable, because trust makes cheaper the cost of transaction. In other words, the lack of ethics is expensive in money as well as in human pain, or that immorality is expensive in money and in human pain, and that the weaker are those that pay most debts of humankind. To act rationally does not mean to have benefits at any price, that it is more prudent and ethical to cooperate than to search for a maximum individual benefit. All this and much more is explained by Adela Cortina with great argumentative richness and examples. She says that interdependency constitutes us and that solidarity is irrenounceable. One of the areas where Adela Cortina has contributed important reflections is nearby the doings of CEPAL, is care. The proposal of policies to countries from ECLAC we have called to advance towards a society of care. Adela Cortina tells us that care is a fundamental aspect of human being because as social beings we need irremediably of others to be able to survive. To take care of those that surround us is a moral obligation that shows us how interdependent we are, and the existence of care is a fact that destroys the legend of egoistical individualism, says Adela Cortina. She also points out that we are born as vulnerable beings and dependent. This is why care and compassion for others is what allows us to have the preservation of humankind, because we have the capacity to extend the care beyond the lines of our children and kin, the capacity to reach foreigners in foreign space and even strangers. Another field of great contribution of Adela Cortina at the Center for Latin America and the Caribbean, the ECLAC, is the elimination of poverty. The fact that Adela Cortina says that if it is true that economy is the science that tries to overcome scarcity, it is also, and very special, the science that's to eliminate poverty. And it celebrates the goals of sustainable development and the SDG number 1 of the eradication of poverty. The respective contribution is the concept of aporophobia, that refers to the attitudes of rejection, aversion, fear, disdain, and animadversion towards what is collective of the people and situations of poverty. It is a concept that Adela Cortina coined over 2 decades ago, and of which she has written very much, and published a book called Aporophobia, The Rejection to Poor of the Poor, and that carries as a subtitle A Challenge for Democracy. In this book, Adela Cortina makes an exhaustive analysis of the sources and manifestations of this rejection and the discourses of hate or rejection associated, and poses options of solution for these feelings and behaviors that menace the democratic coexistence. The explicative power and communicative power of this term carried the Real Academia Española de la Lengua to include it in its dictionary in the year 2017. Adela has also written on the relationship between aporophobia and migratory problematics, analyzing clearly that those that generate phobia, rejection, disdain, and animadversion are not foreigners as a whole, but a certain collective, a certain category of foreigners, the poor foreigners. For a region where a third part of the population is poor and where the migratory flows have grown exponentially, economic migrants, environmental, forced migrants, involuntary, assistance of asylum, applicants for asylum, refugees, migrants in situations as irregular persons that have been trafficked, and children that are not accompanied. The subject, migrations of aporophobia and the challenges of ethical challenges of humankind, reactions to migration of Latin America and the Caribbean cannot be more relevant and urgent. Unfortunately, we are witnesses of the sufferings of the migrant people in our region that carry at a risk their lives, and we observe with alarm a moment of the phenomena of this migration and xenophobia and racism against migrant people. Thus, dear Professor Adela Cortina, your conference occurs in a very timely moment in the context of the region. Without more ado, it is very good for me to invite you to deliver your conference, your keynote conference, as a part of the cycle of commemorative celebrations for the 75th anniversary of ECLAC.
Bueno, buenos días.
Good morning or good afternoon. I would like to cordially welcome all of you and thank ECLAC and its Executive Secretary, José Manuel Salazar-Xirinachs, to celebrate the 75th anniversary of ECLAC because, as is my case, Latin America and the Caribbean is in my heart. ECLAC is a truly fundamental organization. The world would have been worse without ECLAC. So celebrating the 75th year is a matter of joy for all of us. Being able to be a part of this celebration and to associate with this celebration is a true gift that I am deeply thankful for and that I hope to somehow be able to repay at some point. Thank you for allowing me to be here this morning. Well, the topic that I dedicated myself to work on, migration, aporophobia, and ethical challenges for humanity, reactions to migration in Latin America and the Caribbean, is of the utmost importance. What I would like to defend here in this intervention is that it is a topic that has not been made sufficiently visible in the public space. It is not visible in respect of other matters that have had much more attention. It is crucial. And I believe it is not only one of the greatest challenges of our time, but it may be the greatest challenge of all. It is a true challenge, and we need to take it into account as it affects all countries. And only with the collaboration of all our countries will it be solved. I believe it should be more dynamic through the media, shared in all forms of communications because it is truly painful. But I would like to begin by saying that this area that I work in, moral philosophy and policy, has been debating between two virtues that would be the virtue of justice and happiness. There are two goals of human beings, justice and happiness, and this is important as they are very different. Justice is demanding, and in different societies, that which is fair is not something that is simply invited to or advised. It is something that must be complied with. Whereas happiness is more of an invitation, of suggestion, and happiness is important for each person. Each person must decide what makes him or her happy. And here, somehow, when Martia Sen says that we should all carry forward the life plan to value, I believe it is true. We all have different life plans, and it is a personal matter. But the issue of justice is not only personal, it is social. And a society that does not share the most basic elements of what is fair is a society that cannot build jointly. It cannot carry its life forward in a joint fashion. It can somehow advance, but to build a society together, we must share this element of justice, which we know is key for our societies. That is why, from the beginning, I wanted to distinguish between what is just and what is good. It is not the same. Allow me to offer you an example. A partner of mine said that happiness consists in studying philosophy. I'm not sure everyone would agree, and I see you're laughing, so you don't necessarily agree. But philosophy is interesting and important in this sense, since we realize that there are proposals for happiness which are personal. We need to talk with our peers, and it is not just a matter of personal choice, it is a public demand. And it is not only something that is left to an invitation or advice. If there is no agreement, we must continue to talk about this to reach a minimum agreement. Otherwise, we cannot move forward. In this sense, John Royce very adequately mentioned that justice is the first virtue of social institutions, as truth is the same for thought. And this needs to be rejected if it's not true. It doesn't matter whether these institutions are organized and efficient. If they are fair, they must be reformed or abolished. And one of the main virtues of humans, justice cannot be subjected to transactions. You cannot transact or negotiate with justice. We are celebrating the 75th anniversary of ECLAC this year. And I will say this to you, but you know very well, it is an organization dependent on the UN for Latin America and the Caribbean that promotes the economic development of the region. In December, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights of the United Nations will also have its 75th anniversary. It is an ethical, political, and legal event that is extremely relevant for mankind. Worldwide, the value and dignity of all people and the commitment to project and protect from the United Nations the rights that will be recognized as first and second generation and further expanding to a second, third, and fourth generation. It is not a utopia. It is something that can take place. The word utopia is not attractive for me because it means that it's something that doesn't exist, and opting for something that doesn't exist is does not make sense. And of course, utopias are something that needs to be worked on, but mostly we need to look for common ideals, ideals that we wish to materialize. And I feel that the advantage of human rights is this ideal that we all of mankind should tend towards, and that is the commitment of the declaration, considering that justice and peace in the world recognize the intrinsic reality of all human beings. The General Assembly proclaims the Declaration of Human Rights as a common ideal that all peoples and nations should strive for. And of course, there's been different declarations in different cultures, but all the countries in Latin America and the Caribbean recognize the Declaration of Human Rights of the UN and have signed all of the pacts such as the social and cultural ones. And I would like to state that declaring something is committing to it. It is about cooperating with other countries in order to reach the goal. That is a characteristic of this endeavor. We must reach this commitment in order to address the issue of migration. It is important because it would seem that there are many declarations, and the Secretary of the United Nations is quite discouraged because all these declarations exist but are not met. There's many declarations, very little execution, so we should commit to taking these further and to commit and comply with these declarations. We not only commit, each of our countries not only commit, but also collaborate, promise to collaborate and reach a goal that if it is not done together, it will never be reached. I would also like to stress that the human rights are something that we should all do. We must all abide by the justice system. That is the key. We must do it in a human fashion, and it requires cooperation of all countries. That is why we are all committed to helping each other. The topic we're going to talk about in this session, which is migration, well, we need to recognize that there are still millions of people in the world that are migrating who would perhaps rather not. According to the International Migration Organization, 3.6% of the global population is a migrant population. 281 billion people are migrants. When migration takes place, despite the interests of the people, we find these forced migrants, and this is a concept that we are seeing increasingly, forced migrants. These are not people who are changing their residence because they wish to do better, but those people that have no choice but to change their place, the place where they live in order to have a better life. These are forced migrants, and I believe that one of the main challenges of the 21st century is to end forced migration, ending it, and thinking about hospitality and looking at all the steps of migration. Of course, it's interesting, but there is also the goal of ending forced migration so that people can live in their land without having to deploy. It must be very difficult to change residence because you need to take your children. What is going to happen to my children along the way? What will happen to my family? Will they be sold? Will they be kidnapped? This is a very difficult situation, painful, full of anguish and distress. We know that migration has always existed, and human beings look for resources in other parts of Earth, and Earth has been extinguishing some beings, and we are extending and deploying throughout the Earth, but this is no longer sufficient. This idea is not correct. We need to somehow prevent this from happening if people do not wish to change where they live. So we have war, pests, and we need to add now the migratory situation to all of these very difficult tasks at hand, and making reference, of course, to the four horsemen of the apocalypse. And to these four projects, we need to recognize what is urgent and what is important. We need to attend to migrants in all the different steps. That is what is important. We need to see where we want to advance to. I would like to propose the creation of a cosmopolitan society. This is a tradition that comes from ancient Greece, creating a cosmopolitan society where everyone is included, where no one is excluded. It is a dream that comes from Western tradition, and it is present also in some other traditions. And it, of course, continues with a Christian illustrated tradition. It is a very broad tradition that wishes to have a world where all human beings can be first-class citizens, where there are no second or third-class citizens.
The objectives of sustainable development propose that no one should stay behind. And so no one stays behind, and this is the first point that I would like to comment on. We have to construct this cosmopolitan society where no one is delayed. And this is one of the ethical problems, the problem that we deal with today. We would have to construct in one way or another a global justice. A global justice that truly would allow that no one would be left behind and that everyone would be included. But this we will deal with later on. This is what is posed by the SDGs, to see how no one can be left aside. What are the fundamental challenges that are posed by migrants in Latin America and the Caribbean? The center of attention must be the person. Clearly, the treaties, the person must be the very center. It was said not long ago by a representative of Solidarity organization, we are not concerned with problems. We are concerned with people that have problems. We are concerned not of problems, but peoples that suffer problems. The problem is interesting because the people that have problems are interesting. The World Bank, over 41 million people originally from Latin America and the Caribbean, live outside of their countries of origin. The destinations for Latin America are the United States, regions, Spain, Canada. This is data of the OECD. In the displacement, the risks they run are inhuman, and one of the ethical demands is to give safe transit where they respect the rights of the migrant people. And the last time a situation that is new in America has occurred in Latin America and the Caribbean. Traditionally, the region was a receptor of migrants, and the direction of migration has changed. In 1990, it had 7 million immigrants, and now it has a immigrant population of almost 50 million people in the year 2020. The migratory crisis in Venezuela is the most meaningful in the last 50 years in the Western Hemisphere. 7.7 immigrants in 2023 have immigrated to different countries, but those of Latin America and the Caribbean have welcomed over 80% of the migrant Venezuelan population. These are intra-regional movements, though there continues to be a great quantity of people in the region that try and come to other countries. The question is if all these countries that have welcomed immigrants have welcomed them with difficulty in the countries of destination, with hospitality, or even with thanks. And to answer those questions, first I would like to pose, as being said by the Executive Secretary, if what concerns us is aporophobia or xenophobia, if what concerns us are the foreigners, or what concerns us are poor foreigners, and even the poor within our own family, without any need that they be foreigners. The migrants that produced rejection or rise difficulties are not the tourists or foreign professors. They're not powerful entrepreneurs, but the poor. This is a reflection that I made in my own country, in Spain, where they spoke with great enthusiasm in the press of foreign tourists that came. They were foreigners, but there was great enthusiasm because it affects the gross national product. But it was not spoken with welcome the immigrant. The tourist was not the same as the immigrant. The immigrant is poor. The tourists come with the means that can help us out to increase the national gross product. And if the question was if we have xenophobia or aporophobia, the word aporophobia was invented by me, but I offer it to all of you because it carries to reflect. What disturbs is the xenos of another reason or another place, or what disturbs is the aporos, that has nothing to give in exchange, that him that has nothing to offer and no resources. It is the aporos, I believe, and in migration, those that produce a greater rejection are those poor foreigners, because I understand that the poor, and I know you are economists, and you have a great quantity of measures for poverty, and you could speak all morning, but I will offer you a version of what poverty is. The poor is that seems to not have anything interesting to give in exchange. He that seems not to have anything interesting to give in exchange. Human beings, and this is being studied, it has been studied neuroscientifically, we need each other. So we try to give to those that can give it back to us. Human being is not a maximizer of the benefit that tries to dislodge the people from the road. We are homo-reciprocal. We are reciprocators. We will give as long as we receive. The key of our organization is the exchange, and in exchange, people are not radically egotistical, but they are interested in altruism if they can receive something. A story was told that those professor from Oxford that went to the funerals of all his colleagues, and people asked him why go to the funerals of all his colleagues. The answer was because he hoped that when he died, they also went to his funeral, but not the same people, obviously. This is a key that human beings are reciprocators and not maximizers, and that we want to give as long as we can receive from that to whom we give or from another. And this is what is called indirect reciprocity, organizing our lives and giving sense to what contractual societies are, where we wish to give as long as in one way the state will give back to us. The exchange that we always try to exchange with that him that can give us something exchange that can be money, votes, favors, anything we might need. We unite the Matthew principle that the one who most has, more shall be given. He that has little, what little he has will be taken away. The result is very clear. The poor is that seems to have nothing interesting to give in exchange. Poor migrants would seem not to have anything interesting to offer. However, that view of the migrant as someone that has nothing to offer must be changed radically, because it is not true, and because it is an immoral position. The view that the migrant has nothing to give is completely immoral for two reasons. In the first place, because it is false. False visions only distort reality. It is clearly immoral what is false because we don't see reality clearly. And in the second place, because it's myopic, is short-sighted. Migrant people contribute benefits to the countries of destination that must be acknowledged openly and thanked to prosper. They contribute a great quantity of benefits, and the benefits must be acknowledged. We have to thank them to prosper not only each country, but society all, it thanks the migrant people. A just society thanks the migrant people. In the second place, and as to myopics, each person values himself by himself with a simple price. Who cannot appreciate this is short-sighted and is unable to exercise a use of that deep human reason that is cordial reason that will respect the value of each person. I believe that the nucleus of modern ethics is that each person is valuable by himself, and not to know how to appreciate the value of each person is simply an enormous myopic act, a lack of heart, and a lack of cordial being. This is why I invite for a long time that in education, it is one of the keys for the respect of human rights that we do it with compassion reason. The cordial reason is to know how to appreciate the value of each person, for the benefits offered to the economy and for the value that it has in itself. Both sides are entities that have to be taken in account. In any case, a good way of dissolving prejudgments with immigrants when they get to a destination country is to accelerate the process of incorporation to current life, which gives them the opportunity of including in the receiving society, and also the possibilities of insertion from the private and public networks. In Spain and in all countries, there's a great quantity of entrepreneurs that would be very happy to hire a good quantity of immigrants, and they can't because the processes of regulations are very slow and they cannot hire the people. We have to accelerate those processes so that immigrants may give us all that they can give of themselves. What benefits do they give to the countries of destination? I have to point out that I speak about benefits because I think they report them and that they help that human progress come forward, that people are valuable for themselves. We have to take both sides in account. But let us see the benefits. Migrants contribute mainly an increase of young and children population, an increase in demography, and that they take over work that are rejected by the nationals as they are difficult and distributed in a precarious way. The care of ill or elderly people, agriculture, construction, work that the nationals don't want to be done are those that are taken in by the immigrants. An ethical response of what people merit is to make possible they are not stagnated in those precarious jobs, but that they might have access to those that are better retributed. That they should start, those the nationals don't want, but that this should progress. They should not be stagnated there because they have to create the same level as the rest. It is also mentioned as a benefit interculturality. In the case of Latin America and the Caribbean, multicultural or intercultural is incorporated in each one of the countries, and they are linked by a link that is joint for all. In the case of immigrants reaching other countries, you have to get accustomed to find people of other countries, other regions, and other sites, and not only the values of the own region and the own country. The country of origin increases its gross product with money that allows them to prosper, and the region as a whole. For a discussion, it would seem to me that this is a double-sided weapon. The country of origin increases its GDP, but it decapitalizes humanly. We have to stop that it should go from one place to another. Immigrants that have to mobilize, decapitalize humanly. The region increases its income. Governors and moralists favor that a great number of their citizens should be obliged to immigrate, even if it is running enormous risks to get rid of a population that disturbs them and to increase the GDP of their countries with any effort by their part. This is produced the subject of money that we all greet with enthusiasm. This has to be seen with care because it helps to improve the countries of origin. It helps to improve the region, but countries decapitalize, humanly speaking, and on the other hand, the governance and moralists can reject that disturbs them, those people that disturb them, and may increase the GDP without having to deploy any effort. In this sense, and to end, as the question would be how to stop forced migrations and hospitality, it is demand to urgencies. As the Executive Secretary says, one must give a compliant response, taking care of all the phases of the migratory process.
The full migratory crisis. And this is why no one is forced to migrate, given the fact that there are no conditions to lead a dignified life in their country. This is a topic that needs to be constantly addressed. Hospitality. Hospitality should last for some time, but now we need to take care of hospitality and other people without leaving anyone out, with caring for everyone. And for this, we need synergy between the political power, companies, and citizen power. We need to have synergies in order to achieve this hospitality. We should not forget that the end goal is not just that. We need to look at all the phases of development in order to make it as inclusive as possible, and so that at the end there is no need for forced migration. And the International Pact for Safe Migration by the UN, signed in 2018, which seeks to minimize the structural issues that force people to abandon their place of origin. It reads, we commit to creating political, economic, and social conditions adequate for people to live in a peaceful, productive, and sustainable manner in their own country and to fulfill their personal aspirations to prevent that the deterioration of the environment should force them to seek migration and forms of subsistence in other places. So we commit to having the means within our countries to prevent migration. And I would ask and say perhaps that in order for them to not have to carry out irregular migration or regular migration in general, they should find everything they need in their country in order not to have to leave. These are some of the promises made, and these promises must be complied with and they must be fulfilled. Of course, there are some factors of attraction and expulsion, of course, finding greater opportunities in employment, finding more safety in their daily lives. And that includes family planning and, of course, having more possibilities for education and training. These things attract migrants to other countries. And of course, expulsion would be due to lack of job opportunities, the crises, humanitarian crises, the increase of insecurity and violence, given the actions of mobs, maras, gangs, kidnappings. Migrants go from one country to another, and one of the main issues is that of reinforcing the safety and security in each country. It is important to have synergies between the political, economic, and corporate power. Corporations must be exercise corporate social responsibility, and policies must carry out their actions and, of course, seek a positive situation for those who come from abroad. I'd like to make a pause here for a minute. The diplomatic work that you all do is of the utmost importance because expulsion is sometimes given or the result of a bad political situation experienced by countries. So the solution is not with the citizens, but with the diplomats. Diplomatic means are of the utmost importance so that people don't need to leave their countries. People not having to leave because of war or ill situations. It's important for people to be able to have work. And finally, I don't want to tire you, but it's important to understand what direction we will take. And that is part of being a cosmopolitan city. We need to look at our migratory policies to have cosmopolitan cities and to prevent people from having to leave their countries. Global justice is necessary. Global justice is necessary but impossible. The UN must lead international cooperation, but it does not have any co-active capacity, and it must abide by national sovereignties. In 2008, it proposes in the text to empower migrants and to generate trust relationships. It also proposes some principles. The first is to focus on people. But the third is obviously about guaranteeing the sovereignty of the states. And it states very clearly that the global program says that the countries, the nations have the prerogative to define their migratory policies in accordance with international law. So the matter then is that international law, and you know this better than I do, does not have the coactive capacity to do this. And then we start this debate, which is the problem of global justice. Nagel reminds us of this, and without justice in a state, there can't be any global justice. A moral, humanitarian morality is important, but it should include the protection of the universal human rights. But these cannot become legal or justice matters because there is no monopoly of the force that lies with the states. Nagel says that the idea of global justice without a global government is not doable. There is a minimum moral aspect here, and when an authority, a central authority, supports these matters, when the individuals are subject to the empire of the law and are citizens in a republic, Nagel links political morality of egalitarian justice to this theory and cites the demands of the authors. These normative demands beyond humanitarianism are part of the state. This republic, beyond the republic, there is no possibility of justice. So global justice is not possible. However, and I'm going to conclude now, they also presented two paths to accessing a cosmopolitan city. One would be to build a global state, and this possibility, it would seem, was desirable, but inconvenient. It could become a totalitarian state, and then the medicine would be worse than the illness. And there's another path that makes sense and that perhaps we should take, which is democratizing all of the countries progressively so that by means of treaties and agreements we can build global justice, a global society that would not necessarily come from co-action, but from the agreements and treaties, which is what we're doing. This is the democratization at a point where democracy is being set back. It's important to satisfy these migrant processors. And creating these conditions, I feel that it's possible and that there are others that should be included. You cannot understand the operation or functioning of each of these issues in the world without having a cosmopolitan perspective. In the second place, we understand that it's necessary to resolve this not in a bilateral fashion, that would be the Cold War, also not with imperialism, but with multilateralism. Multilateralism is where the countries would agree that on different aspects that can be migration, climate, and others. these more specific matters that allow for treaties that are being carried out, treaties for migration, for climate, all these that are signed to generate these cosmopolitan societies for which we know there are a series of constitutions, cosmopolitan constitutions that are created by the different countries. They're common to different countries, but they are somehow an umbrella for determined countries. These agreements need to be signed or reached slowly and to the moment that you build this social or global justice, not imposed by a state, but created multilaterally, and trying to see in each of these topics which is the most important stratus to work on these topics, and if it is at a national level, perhaps regional level, or by groups of countries, or at a global level. The goal, therefore, is that which in the 21st century we would like to end poverty, but also deal with scourges such as forced migration. That is something that is not need to be done because it's not possible that there are so many human beings that have nothing. We need to do it jointly. One country alone cannot do it. We need to reach common solutions and therefore create this joint cosmopolitan society together. Thank you for your attention. Thank you very much, Professor, for your inspiring reflections. It's extremely important because it's a different kind of presentation and it inspires us. I'm taking some of our moderators' work. We have a presentation, a platform that has information on this. Well, yes, we would like to remind everyone and the executive secretary that we have the Slido platform. You can scan the QR code that is on the screens and you can ask your questions there. If you could please include your name, then the question, so that the executive secretary can moderate. Thank you. Thank you. Well, I'm going to begin with the first question. As a result of this, your proposal talks about the cosmopolitan society, and you, in your book, Aprophobia, you have a section where you reflect on the abyss and the gaps between this universalist civic ethics that legitimizes and can inspire this cosmopolitan society. It legitimizes economic and political institutions and the reality of citizens between morality, thought morality, and written morality in constitutions, laws, and declarations, and the morality lived by institutions and people. In relation to this, I would like to ask you, because one of the agendas beyond human rights, I'm not even talking about declarations of international treaties, the 2030 agenda, the 2030 agenda for sustainable development of the UN. That is what gives us our vision. All the work we do here at the UN falls under this agenda. Of course, it is an agenda that has a high moral content of desirable goals. It was adopted in 2015 by 190 sovereign member states. However, we find a growing trend of politicians and thinkers, political parties that are attacking the agenda either because they do not like 1 or 2 points of it, 1 or 2%, but they attack it. They attack the whole thing. And others because they feel that it is more of a procedural matter. It's an imposition from some external entity, as if it were their own sovereign nations have not supported it. So this was agreed by the member states, most probably the states that were criticized. I would like to continue with the content of the 2030 agenda. How do you analyze this tendency towards rejection? It's something that so many have thought about. And still some believe it's desirable. What would you recommend the UN to do in the face of this criticism? How should we respond?
Thank you very much for the question. It's the question of a million. I don't know if to consider you as a friend or an enemy, because those questions are not asked. No agenda and no proposal will generate, in principle, a universal consensus, as we all know. It happens with the constitutions of each country, and it happens with the proposals that are universal. What has to be done in these cases is when we have the conviction that many of us have that the Declaration of Human Rights is a declaration that is concerned by all human beings and that benefits all human beings. And that lately the Agenda 2030, what it does is to fill in with each one of the objectives proposed that declaration. We have to try and carry it forward, showing with facts that truly it is of benefit for all. When people realize that a proposal that was made, come from where it might come, and that that proposal is favorable, they gather it with pleasure. We must not be disanimated, but to establish dialogues amongst the different representatives of different countries so that we can speak of everything, but show with works that, in effect, it is being of benefit for each one of the people and each one of the beings, those proposals that are being made from the Agenda 2030. And in principle, as we're speaking about migration, I think it would be good that it should be concerned more of migration in concrete. It is a subject of which they speak in different points, but not specifically. However, it is a subject that must be dealt with within the agenda or included in many paragraphs because it is one of the criticisms that have been made. Why the subject of migration is not specifically contemplated, I think we could have it in mind. The universal proposals always come from some place, from some site, and from other places it would seem that it produces a bit of rejection because it's not been the idea that comes from these places. We have to establish dialogues, human beings establish dialogue showing one with others the goodness of the proposals or the benefit of the proposals for all human beings. I think this is how we are convinced to establish dialogue, because this should never be broken. And work it out, because if it is in daily life, people will realize the benefits offered by these proposals. Both sides are fundamental. Dialogue, as has been commented before, we're not isolated individuals. Dialogue is fundamental. And to see the proposals that are being done, because when people see the benefits for themselves, it is then that they will be convinced. Both sides are fundamental. Dialogue must never be abandoned. Human beings are not individuals that are isolated, but we are in dialogue. And when this does not occur is when we could discuss if it would be of benefit or not. If it is seen that it is a benefit, people will stop discussing the subject. Thank you. It seems very interesting that being a person that lives in the world of ideas and absolute values, or not absolute, universal values, aspirations, that the solutions are of procedures. It seems wise to show with facts to the people that truly the agenda brings benefits with it for all, and to do this through the dialogue and persuasion seems to me very wise. There is a question here of Alicia Williner. Says, the resolution of 1213 of public policies is happiness. Can you indicate or make an appreciation on this subject? I will add to this another question that I hope you don't find it as bad as the previous. We have a discussion and the distinction you made between justice and other things and happiness that is more of persuasion. The United Nations, how to measure the GDP. We tend to measure it by materialistic things, and it is left on the outside. If we reflect what we want to measure beyond a material well-being, we want to measure justice, inequality, the dimensions that you have mentioned, liberty, freedom. We want to measure capabilities, the conditions so that human beings. I understand that you do not measure happiness. In spite that efforts have been done to rank happiness, what should we measure and what should we not measure? I think we should measure justice. I continue to insist that there are two fundamental sides in ethics. As we're speaking of ethics, there are two fundamental aspects of ethics that are justice and happiness. I insist upon the fact, even though it is said that the measures of happiness is very personal. Happiness is personal. There are people that are happy with the determined choices and others that are happy with other options. I have given the example of my friend that thinks that everyone should study philosophy. But it is a simple example, but it is a true one. It is one of the large mistakes committed by the parents when they have wanted their children to be happy as they think you should be happy. And this is one of the large mistakes of totalitarianism that have tried to make happy their citizens in spite of its citizens. Happiness is not imposed in any way. And to measure happiness on what a basis? An economic basis? Someone can have scarce wealth and is absolutely happy because he carries forward his life plan. Happiness is a personal choice. I recall someone said in Spain, a socialist party said that they were going to make all the Spaniards happy. And I thought, I know whom I will not vote for. You cannot make happy people. People are not made happy. Happiness is a personal option. What do organizations of international nature have to do, and the groups, to place the basis of justice? Justice is what has to be demanded for all. And precisely the Declaration of Human Rights has the enormous virtue of giving us the keys in justice that we might have today. What is just? It's to give each one what corresponds to him. The question is, what corresponds to each one? Evidently, theories of justice, there are millions. But since 1948, there are criteria on justice that can show in principle for the whole humankind. All human beings have a right to life, have a right to free expression and free meeting and association, the participation in their country. All human beings have welcome to health, education. The Declaration of Human Rights of 1948, with its 30 articles, give us the key of what we understand in the 21st century by justice, what corresponds to each one. And it has been broadened with other rights, such as the development of people, to the healthy environment. And we broaden more and more because we realize that neural rights are missing and that these rights are the key of justice. We can measure those keys with all the imperfections that human beings have. Yes, they can be measured in some way or another. In what measure? Are they fulfilling these rights or not? Happiness is too important so that we be concerned about it. Happiness with measures. This has to be the option of each person, and there are people that suddenly choose to leave everything to help out others. And there are people that wish to enrich only, and people that for whom happiness is personal. These are personal options. And what seems to me very sad is when we want to measure happiness, we are forgetting that what we have to measure is justice. And we forget about justice. So we speak of other things when really to measure happiness cannot be done, as it is a personal choice. It's not one of a society, but a personal choice of each one. And of justice, I think we have to speak because justice is highly demanding. When we say something is just, it is demanded, and it is unjust that there should be 41 million people that have to travel in spite of their wishes because they cannot live well in their countries. This is what we have to measure. Not if they're happy or not, but it is unjust that those people should have to travel for migration, that these people are dying of hunger, as we know. Millions of people of the humankind that are dying of famine. This can be measured well, and it is unjust, and we cannot allow it. I wrote a book that was called Minimum Ethics. Minimum ethics meant that there were minimums of justice under which you cannot fall without falling in inhumanity. These, the human rights, are a minimum of justice, and it's not to be giving people a great quantity of things, but a minimum of justice.
Derecho a expresar.
Everyone has the right to express themselves, to participate in the life of their country, to deploy throughout the territory, and to have information about everything. It is different for everyone. It is different for everyone, and everyone sees this from their own perspective, from their traditions. Imposing happiness is what has led to illustrated despots. That is that idea of giving everything to the people, but without the opinion of the people, despotism and tyranny, totalitarian countries. So we need to make that distinction. And of course, we can't leave it aside. We cannot rest assured without, we cannot rest until everyone has all these conditions. I believe it is key. Well, there are many things we'd like to think about. Ana Gesma says the feminization of migration is to do with the global value chains. How do you bring this cosmopolitan city together with a care society? Well, care is one of the keys in a cosmopolitan city because cosmopolitan cities do not wish to exclude anyone. We don't want to have first and second class citizens. And it is care. Care is key to maintain life, to maintain the health. It would have to be, of course, linked with despotism. Here we have another question. Wouter Schalier asks, what do we think about artificial intelligence? Well, very interesting. Artificial intelligence is of the utmost importance. The European Union, if you recall, talked about electronic people a long time ago. Artificial intelligence is thrilling and it is a great opportunity. I feel it is a great opportunity for improvement. It should not damage or harm people. It should not harm nature, and it should serve to empower people and nature. Ethics empower, not harming is the motto. We need to benefit people. There is also the autonomy of justice, and when we have any novelty, artificial intelligence, for example, we should not harm. We should not harm people or nature, and we are receiving a series of proposals we should empower, but these need to be weapons that empower people and nature. It must be done carefully, though, because as you all know, data are being stolen and we need to finish everything that is harmful and simply empower and strengthen everything that is positive. It is not that easy to know where the limit is, and it's not that easy to obtain these economic advantages with artificial intelligence because there's barriers. Although we see that it can go forward, there is a clear battle, and it is important to be leaders and pioneers. It is important to advance, and here we have two perspectives: to advance no matter what, and to be prudent would be the second path, to be prudent in respect of the possible repercussions. I believe that artificial intelligence should be welcome, no instilling fear is necessary, but always keeping with the benefits of not harming, supporting, and we need to know a lot about artificial intelligence. It's important to make sure that all this works in favor of mankind, in favor of nature. It needs to be positive, and ChatGPT and AI are consuming a large amount of energy. Investing in energy requires the operation of ChatGPT and AI, and we need to know this. And in general, all the people that are talking about the difficulties with climate change, we have to be careful. We need to be prudent and avoid harming others. Well, is there space for politics to promote ethical corporate responsibility or economic responsibility? Well, that is one of the things of the times. The community in Valencia has seen this, and that's where I live, and we still have strong convictions. Good companies need to create good societies. That is what we believe, and companies that do not form good societies are not good companies. And many of you know that with the Millennium Development Objectives, it is important because it was once thought that if companies were not a part of this effort, objectives would not be met. So it's important because this, without the economy, there is no way to achieve these goals. And it is the economic world. It should be an ethical world. For a company to be ethical, it wasn't necessarily as if it doesn't take away from it being efficient and making money. And there's a slogan that is not very fortunate. It had to do with ethics is profitable. Ethics is profitable, but I don't really think so. If there are legitimate expectations of all those affected by economic activities, it generates allies and not adversaries. And it generates more wealth than the contrary. And in fact, it saves pain and suffering. It saves money that would have been spent in other transactions. The economy needs to try to end poverty and generate wealth. That is the task of the economy. And it is, and the economy needs to generate positive societies, and companies that are not ethical are not good companies. The things that we're working on can come with the title Better Companies Equal Better Democracies. If the companies work the way they should, there will be a better democracy and there will be better countries. And I feel that taking into account all those affected we need to work with the adversaries. Thank you very much, Professor, for your conference. Thank you to ECLAC for the opportunity to participate in this. It is my wish for you that you continue to have such fecund and rich years for many years to come. It has been an honor for me to participate in this anniversary, to participate in this celebration of 75 years of existence of ECLAC. I don't know if I will be around in the next 20, 35 years, or even 75 years. So we won't be able to celebrate in person, unfortunately. But I would like to thank ECLAC for what is being done. It is a better world, and it's extremely important for all human beings. This is what brings us here today, because humans have dignity. It's not a simple price, and everyone belongs. Thank you very much to ECLAC. I hope that you will celebrate many more years.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Professor Cortina, Executive Secretary. Would like to remind you that these keynote speeches will continue until February, and we still look forward to having several other of these speeches, and we'd like to invite you to take a look on our website. Thank you.
Pues.
Directores de CEPAL, por favor, aquí para una foto op.